life in 3 dimensions got me bent and got me twisted. I know I done said a lot, but I should probably stop pretending. I don't really hold the key and I can't really push a button. I just step up to the mic and try my very best to bust it, but I ran out of breath. It's tight in my chest, my feet just might fail. I can't stand the pressure.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. You're listening to Racially Speaking, where we have real and honest conversations about race as it's viewed through the lenses of faith, family, and vocation. I'm your regular host, David Phipps, and also joining me today, as per usual, we won't say it's rare anymore because we're in a good streak. I think it's 2 in a row. You guys know him if you've been listening to the show, but of course I'm joined by my prodigal co-host, a.k.a. Mr. 2 Chainz, a.k.a. Michael B. Phelps, Aquaman.
No, that is not me.
Social Justice Cowboy.
That's somebody else. That's me, Social Justice Cowboy.
Mr. Wyatt, John Mark Walker. What's going on, brother?
What's up, man?
Well, I mean, you talked about being a member at the pool and a pool with black lifeguards. You did swim team, so you're pretty much that.
Yeah, but me and my friend always competed for last place on the swim team. So if you're counting on me to save you from a fight across the pool, it's better if I run all the way around.
So you embody like a half of a tearing down a stereotype.
Yeah, just half. I can swim, but just not well.
You can swim, yeah. I mean, you're on swim team, so I'm sure you're a better swimmer than me.
Well, I mean, when I say I'm bad, I'm like, it's bad. It's bad.
So Caitlin did swim team, and she went to the pool the other day, and she came home and said how terrible it was because she felt so, like, out of shape and out of it. And she's like I can't believe I couldn't. It was something like I couldn't believe I couldn't swim my normal 30 laps.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I mean, I was genuinely like dumbfounded. I was like, 30 laps?
30
You couldn't swim 30 laps.
What'd you get, like 15? That's incredible.
I was just like, that I could not do that. Like, what did we do last episode? Like, for $1 million? Like, I couldn't do that if you were dangling $1 million in front of me the whole time. Like,
that's so many laps. That is a lot. Good
and
for
she
her.
said that used to be like some kind, like a warm up or something. I don't know. I was just like,
I'm sure it was.
That's insanity.
I'm sure it was.
Good
for her.
I ran cross country for a year in high school to stay in shape for other sports. And I remember going to our first race, and it was like it's a 5K, so it's like a little over 3 miles. And I remember getting there for my first one, and the coach was like, all right, warm up, run a mile. And I'm like, run a mile? Run a mile to warm up? I couldn't believe it. I was like, you're serious?
That's wild. And
then you run a mile to cool down.
Cross country. Do you really? To go a whole mile to cool down from 3 miles? That's wild.
Those endurance athletes are a different breed.
They are. That's not me.
And just unbelievable.
Quick sprints and hard tackles. That's what I do.
Yeah. All right. Look, we got a lot to get into today. Before we get into our main content, I want to say just a couple brief things at the time of recording of what's been going on, not in America, but with the conflict with Israel and Palestine. And I just want to say, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't say anything about it, but I want to say something brief because I think that's all I have to really offer at this point. And what I mean is, I'm going to put this out there as well, is I want to admit and almost kind of confess and lament how little I know about what's going on, like contextually, historically, and how much just catching up I need to do. And I don't say that to shame us or anyone listening, but just, this is something, John Mark, that, in these types of conversations like that is really embodies like our lives. So like we are very much in this space, not just on the podcast, but of speaking up for the marginalized and speaking into race and ethnic issues. But this is one, I'll speak for myself, that is huge. And I know to paint with broad strokes, just very, very little. I don't even have to paint with broad strokes, but didn't have much to say when everything started happening on Saturday with the attacks on Israel and Palestine. and it's just a lack of awareness and knowledge of what's going on. So I've been spending a lot of time trying to play a little bit of catch up. And, in no way I'm going to get to a satisfying place, but at least to a place where I can engage and get my bearings. And so I just want to put that out there. If you're listening to this and expecting us or follow us at all to speak into this a lot, that's great. We're, trying our best to do it responsibly without skirting around anything. There's nothing that I feel held back by that I'm afraid to say. It's just, wow, what do I say that is coherent and responsible? I think right now, I just want to continue to double down on what so many have said that I've seen online. And that's just to speak sorrow and speak against the evil of war, and just to lament and grieve the loss of life, and especially innocent life. What it looks like right now is going on, to put it in terms that I appreciate personally, to understand a little bit of the bearings, is it's a war zone and a lot of innocent lives are being lost. And there's a smaller group, the Hamas, I think that's how you pronounce it, are a terrorist group, but aren't representative fully of the Palestinian people. But the result is innocent lives being lost. So Hamas attacking Israel on Saturday, who are an actual terrorist group, who I think it's accurate to say are like an Al-Qaeda, and then Israel retaliating and essentially bombing and attacking all of Palestine. And again, I'm being a little bit vague because I don't want to say inaccurate information, but that's essentially what's happening. A lot of innocent lives are being lost, and it doesn't seem like it's going to end really anytime soon. So it's affecting a lot of people, obviously Palestinian and Israeli people, and is giving life to a lot of anti-Semitism. And it, of course, I know it's affecting the few people I know who are in the Jewish culture and who have family over in Israel. And so I want to say that, like, we are with anybody hurting as they're navigating what's going on right now. And we want to create space. Like, if you're listening to this or know people listening to this that are affected, leave space for people to reach out and just know that we're with you, and we want to learn and give space in any way we can on this small platform to help in any way, which I know is a daunting thing right now. John Mar, do you got anything on that?
I know that was well said. I don't know enough to speak well to the conflict, but praying that it ends soon and that lives are spared. So,
right.
I think that's all I got. Yeah,
absolutely. 1 second.
No, that was it.
Cool. Yeah. Heavy stuff is, putting it lightly, the heaviest stuff. So we will continue to engage with this best we can, moving forward here on the podcast. I think the only way to segue is, look, kind of our main content today that we planned, John Mark, is to talk about how to engage or not engage well with, I'd say news stories, the internet, just culture in general. It's difficult, man. It's tough out in the streets. I've had to do this well, and this has been a conversation that's been being had for definitely the last 3 to 4 years, but for sure even before then. We want to talk about cancel culture. Okay, cancel culture. We're gonna, lighthearted stuff. We're going to touch on reverse discrimination.
What even is that?
Yeah, look, let's get into this. And look, we're doing this. I guess we will have a little bit of fun with it at times, but not just fun, but I think it's important because obviously we care about engaging with this stuff. And I think there's different ends of the spectrum. One is a cancel culture, which I think, kind of define as kind of a, I almost used the word in the definition, but just a swift, you're done. You make a mistake, you're done mentality towards mostly celebrities, high profile people. But I think we can discuss how we embody that or enact that in, normal everyday life. And then the opposite end of the spectrum is people pushing back on that, on cancel culture being a thing and it being unfair to people being canceled or unfair to people who are just afraid to say the right thing or wrong thing and stuff like that. All right, let's start there. John Mark, what are your initial thoughts when someone brings up cancel culture?
Yeah. So, I think cancel culture, I think it has a lot to do with celebrity or somebody who has a following of some sort. So I don't think it happens to normal people, us normal people down here who, have a friend group of no more than 50 or a connection group of no more than 50,
50?
No following. Yeah, that is the average, I think,
is it?
tribe
Okay.
size. Yeah. So
okay.
that's who you have meaningful relationship with, right? No more than 50. So, if
you got more friends than me.
Well, I'm not saying I got friends that are 50, but
50.
everyone that I have a meaningful connection with, I think is about 50 max. And if you're canceled from all of them and thrown out, I feel like that's something different than what we're talking about, cancel culture, which I think more applies to somebody who's got an online presence or a group of followers, even in real life followers. Or a church, or is a politician, or some type of leader, and then it's the falling out of grace with that people group based on something you did or allegedly did, right? And we have coined that thing cancel culture, right? And I think that we only coined that way because of I would say that it's connected to online presences where you actually can unsubscribe, unfollow, or cancel your subscription, So I think that's where canceling comes from. But I feel like it's as old as time, this when leaders fall out of grace with their people. I feel like it's as old as time. I mean, what is it? Like all throughout history. So like thinking about like King Louis, right? We should ask King Louis's head. Oh wait, we can't. He's super dead, right? King Louis was beheaded right? because he fell out of grace with his people. He was physically canceled, right? And so I also think of like in Bible times, like Moses went on a discovery trip up in the mountains for 40 days. And in that time, his people were like, well, he's not coming back. Let's forget what he said and start do our own thing and build a golden calf, right? So it's not a new phenomenon, but it is, there are new, I think, realities to it. And I wonder if part of it is that people who develop a following online feel like they're entitled to continue to have that following. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, I built this whole thing. I just say one thing and then it's all gone. And it's like, yeah, but you built it, but you don't get to keep it. Right. So,
okay. Yeah. So
what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Is there a healthy element to it? Like, so also great Hamilton quote for those of you that missed that, the King Louis head. Is it all bad or all good? Obviously we live in the nuance here, but I'll share my thoughts. That's unfair to just hear your thoughts.
No, I'd love to share your thoughts and then share with me, and then we can answer that. Yeah.
I'll piggyback off yours with the word entitlement. I think I associate cancel culture with negativity because I think it describes the polarization that we're all living in. But again, y'all, if you listen, know me well enough to know I think it's helpful to paint with broad strokes to then unpack it a little bit. But I would lean on the side of, based on what you said, I don't think it's a thing in the sense of, I think it's a lot like woke culture. I think it's been hijacked by people that are entitled again, I'm painting with broad strokes for right now, and that they don't want to be held accountable for things.
Mm-hmm.
I get it. I don't like I'm not excusing, like I don't like in not theory, but I don't like the notion that there's no grace and that people can't make mistakes. Like, I don't think that in and of itself is a good thing, but I don't think that's what is actually happening a lot of the time when people are, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, are canceled. And here's what I mean. If we ask ourselves, who has been canceled? So we'll just talk about famous people since that's what we're talking about right now. Like,
yeah,
who actually has been canceled? And so off the top of my head, I'll say so I think it's important to understand like what is canceled and what's not canceled, who's canceled. So off the top of my head, okay, so like R. Kelly, canceled. Bill Cosby, canceled.
Yeah, for sure.
Matt Lauer, like canceled. Harvey Weinstein, canceled, right? Like those are people like in my mind that I'm like, that's not cancel culture. That's like and I'm not saying they can't experience redemption and a change and that they become better people, but they're done in the public eye. They're done with their entertaining career, showbiz
they've
career.
Done something
they're done.
That is insurmountable. It is so vile that their reputation is ruined.
So that's
what their name will be known for. It's insurmountable. They won't be back in the public eye.
And I say people like that because oftentimes the pushback on this cancel culture sentiment is, oh, well, what are we going to do? So does that mean like all of this stuff from this era or all of that, their show or their songs, or we got to think differently about this? Or does that mean we're going to unpack all these other things that these people, it's like, well, maybe, but do we not care that this is what happened or that they're guilty of? Like, do we not care about the lives that are changed forever because of like crimes? And so I don't think that's cancel culture, but I think sometimes that stuff is associated with, because of the internet and because of how people, do actually want to see people fail, and which we'll get into, but that's not canceled. Like they're not canceled. Some other people less egregious, like Candace Owens, like she's not canceled.
Have people canceled her?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like I think people in that world would say that they're being canceled because they're speaking up about something that people disagree with. She's not canceled.
She has a huge following.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So she's not canceled. She doesn't. The Black community, by and large, surely doesn't want her to represent y'all, and I think you'd agree.
I think she's like a crazy cousin. Yeah.
Yeah. NFL quarterback Deshaun Watson, he has dozens of sexual misconduct and allegations out being like civil cases.
That's terrible.
About him now. He's not canceled. He's got with that going on, got a giant like record-setting contract to keep playing football. He got a hefty suspension, but he's not canceled. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of confusion and or conflation of what it looks like to be canceled and what it looks like to be held accountable. Last thing though, and I'm gonna give it back to you, is so a better example is, we won't unpack the whole story, but actress Jennifer Aniston, who we don't know who that is, recently got in some hot water because she allegedly liked a post that Jamie Foxx got in, quote unquote, in trouble for being considered anti-Semitic, and she vehemently denied liking the post or anything like that. And that's fine. Like I don't really care if she did or not, liked it or not, but just quickly, swift knee-jerk reaction, threw Jamie Foxx under the bus, and no nuance. And that's her friend. She's worked on movies with him, all that stuff. And just immediately talked about how she disassociated with him completely. And her quote is, "I'm so over cancel culture Because, okay. So then her doing that, then I think a lot of people who supported Jamie Foxx in the Black community, not supporting anti-Semitism, just like sticking up for Jamie Foxx and how he got thrown under the bus, started to get mad at her. And so in response to that, she said, I'm just over cancel culture. Oh, I actually probably just got canceled by saying that. I just don't understand what it means, and goes on to say more stuff.
Someone needs to take the phone away from her.
Stuff like that I'm like, yeah, you're not, that's not cancel culture. You're not being canceled. Really, I could argue you were kind of advocating to cancel Jamie Foxx.
Kind of, yeah.
It's that people don't appreciate what you said about somebody, and you're not entitled to be able to say whatever you want about people, to say, especially if it's to save face for yourself. Look, thoughts on that?
Yeah. I will say this along the lines of what I think you were saying. Our culture is quick to blame and think the worst of the intentions of others rather than thinking the best of what they might say. So even in that Jamie Foxx example, he said, forget what exactly he said, but it was a common saying from the culture he's from. But when you connect it in the broader culture, there are people who would have said similar sentiments, and they were anti-Semitic, right? And so when these two things come together, right, it seems like he might be saying something anti-Semitic, but like believing the best, you're like, oh, maybe there's something culturally I don't understand about what Jamie Foxx is saying, right? Which happened to be true. There was something culturally that was misunderstood. And so if you believe the best about Jamie Foxx, that he's not anti-Semitic, then you would think, oh, there might be something else. That's the reason why he's saying this, right? And so I think there's I think we have a culture that wants to assume the worst of people's intentions and then doesn't have grace or wants to hear forgiveness. So we're not a very a graceful society. It's not full of grace for each other. So I think that's one thing. But I also think like accountability and apology, depending on the grievance, is a good thing that we should accept, right? We should be willing to accept people's sincere apologies. And, when we're talking about public figures and celebrities, people avoid saying the word "I'm sorry" because they could get in legal trouble, that's weird. But we know what a good apology is, and then we also know what just trying to save face or keep your following apology is a fake apology, and those two things. If you apologize and it's not good, and you still lose people, what can I say? You brought it upon yourself. Yes, I think one thing about this whole thing is that nobody deserves to have people follow them. You know what I mean? So and then everybody has the right to not follow anybody, to not let anybody influence them in any way, whoever they want. Everybody has the freedom to choose who they listen to or not. You know what I mean? So, politicians, celebrities, pastors, leaders of any kind, they don't have the right to have people follow them. You have to earn that. You have to earn their trust, earn that following, right? And if you do something that significantly betrays that, then people are going to unfollow you. And I think that is the way that it is. I think it's fine. So I feel like cancel culture is like a phrase that's like a boogeyman. It's like a phrase to get people excited about things that are wrong in our society rather than truly examining okay, something is going on here. People are not as willing to be trusting of others and aren't as willing to forgive, aren't as gracious. So how then do we navigate a society like that, right?
Yeah.
Especially in words, phrases, things that are said that are demeaning and belittling to historically marginalized people and groups.
Yeah.
Right. If you say any of those things today, it's very unpopular to say things that are racist, sexist, phobic of any kind. Right. And those things will get you, quote unquote, canceled. Right. But those are wrong things to say all the time. You know what I mean? So whereas in the past, I think people in power had more freedom to say whatever they wanted to say and oppress people. Now, they're learning you cannot say that and keep the public trust.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how do we? I think that is fantastically explained. So at the the former president and one former President Trump and the delegate, I think is what it says, in 2020, it targeted the phenomenon of cancel culture, saying it's grown into erasing of history, encouraging lawlessness, muting citizens, and violating free exchange of ideas, thoughts, and speech. So essentially saying it's revising history as well as infringing on the American idea of free speech. I think that that's how a lot of people view it. And so that's the kind of the crux of my pushback of, it's not a thing. It's this. All I hear is people exactly like you're saying, who have never been held accountable for things, not wanting to be held accountable, certainly not by people who are below them in their eyes. Yeah. So I think we have to take that into account. But then let me come off of what you said and say, how have you navigated this over the last few years, as well as how are you currently? So like, so let's make it much more relatable because no one's famous here. How do you navigate canceling or not canceling people? It could be people you follow who are maybe famous, but also people in general, like peer to peer or in your tribe of 50 that you mentioned. How do you like in how you live? How do you navigate this? Because it affects all of us, regardless of where we fall.
How do I navigate deciding who to follow and unfollow, or let influence me and not let influence me?
Person to person, that can be people like in your circles that you know, or as well as the famous people.
Yeah, well, I think a good, wise principle and practice in life is to evaluate who brings you life, who generates joy, love, peace in your life, who brings wisdom in your life, wise counsel, who encourages you in good directions, right? I mean, I feel like every parent of a teenager or everyone who's ever been a teenager has had some type of make better choices of your friends conversation, and it's like, so that type of thing. Look for positive things that are brought up in your life from people and from what you let influence you. So that's what I do. I take account of how I'm feeling after I listen to like a podcast, read a book, watch a show, listen to music, or sit in a church or listen to a sermon. I take account of how I'm feeling. How is this affecting my life? Is it positive or negative? And I think recently, if it's been more negative and trending downward, I've actually unsubscribed, actually stopped going. Not if they're a person, not necessarily cut contact, but like stopped initiating, stopped going in places where I run into them. If there's a real conflict, I think there's wisdom in seeing if you actually have to address it. But if it's just that relationship brings about negative things in your life, it's okay to let it, dwindle and fade and fall away. Like that is okay. It doesn't mean that you hate them or wish the worst for them. It's just you can let things float away. So be wise about what you invest your time in and what you listen to and learn from. But I'm curious how you would answer that question too.
I think similarly. So would you say, is it categorized as cancel culture? Take us back to like, I'm genuinely asking, like a 2020 and seeing people you might not have known this about before, but seeing the people in your circles that spoke up against like Black Lives Matter or against anything that brought up systemic racism or the corruption in policing or police brutality, stuff like that. When you saw people who you knew, not famous people,
Right.
speaking up against that stuff, not against those things, not for those things.
Yeah, like against racial justice issues.
Yeah. Yes. What did you do with that? Is that canceling people who disagree with you?
Is it canceling if I, cut them off and stop hanging out with them? That's a good question. I think some people might call that cancel culture, right? That I would, I don't know, move away from fellowship with those people. I think other people would call that self-care, that I would move away from those people. I feel like cancel culture has this thing of disparaging the reputation of others, right? So, if I were to not only pull away my relationship with those people, which is my right to do, I can pull away relationship from whoever. But if I were to not only do that, but also say to everybody else, hey, stop hanging out with these people because blah, 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 blah. Or I spend my time saying, hey, stop going over there because they said this at that church or organization. They did this, they did that. And just kind of broadcast it everywhere, my negative opinions about other people. I think that's more leaning into the graceless negative side of whatever this phenomenon is we call cancel culture. So keeping it personal and close and saying, I'm not going to go in those spaces, I think that's fine. That's maturity. That's life. But constantly tearing down old friends or old spaces that I was in, I think that shouldn't be done, and that's negative. So,
absolutely.
With the exception of if they did something terrible to you, then just speaking the truth isn't always the worst thing. But you got to use wisdom, right? You got to use wisdom. So,
absolutely, that's what I'd want our listeners to take. Like, I don't have anything to add to that. I think I've been operating and living exactly how you just described. I've just not been able to put it so eloquently, but that's great. I think the shift is when this is done poorly. I think the toxicity of cancel culture is for sure when you're bent on the canceling part, on disparaging someone, ruining someone's career, and making sure they suffer, versus just removing yourself or removing them from your life. And it doesn't always have to be a direct thing. We definitely encourage reconciliatory questions. I mean, the conversations at all costs. I think that's biblical as well. But, I think it's okay to apply the Matthew 10:14 verse with, whoever does not receive you nor hears your words when you depart that house or city, shake off the dust off your feet. Like, I think that is appropriate sometimes.
Yeah.
And people of color often, I think, endure too long sometimes because they feel guilty. And sometimes it's just self-care, like you mentioned, like healthy self-care is, hey, get out of there. Like, they're not listening, and it's actually traumatic for you to continue to navigate a space that is become fighting for your dignity versus just a little disagreement.
I think I'd want to add on to this for our listeners. You can leave. You have freedom to leave anything, any relationship, any organization, any group that you're in your life. You have freedom to leave that. And I feel like there can be, especially in religious circles, this pressure that you have to stay. What about the mission? You made this commitment. Like, commitments change. It's not like you said, I'm married to you for life, right? If it's a job, it's hard right now, but there are other jobs out there. If it's your community, that's hard too, but there's other community out there. There's other people out there. Yeah. And so if these things are tearing you down, aren't bringing you life, aren't valuing you, aren't caring for you, you as an adult have freedom to leave, and if you're not an adult, just wait a couple of years, you will be an adult, and then you have freedom to leave. So, So I just want to encourage people. You don't have to be stuck in those spaces that you're in.
Couple things on clarity. To be clear, you're not advocating for to just on a whim leaving a marriage or something like that.
Oh, no.
As you're going through
I said that. If you're married, you're married.
Yeah.
I said you're not married to these other things.
Yeah.
But if you're married, you're married.
Yeah.
So no.
Our listeners are smart.
Yeah.
I didn't want to get canceled on our cancel culture episode,
Yeah.
Okay. So the only pushback for argument's sake I'll give is, yes, freedom. We all have the freedom to leave these spaces. We're not tied to them in the ways we might think. I will say, even for somebody who wants to push back a little bit, I want to, at all costs, encourage people to stay as long as you can, while at the same time, I fully believe that people are staying too long in these spaces. You know what I'm saying? Or like enduring things that they're actually not called to endure, and it's being fed to them that's the moralistic or Christian thing to do, to just endure. I'm not saying that we're not supposed to endure it. Like, we're literally, like, if you're a Christian listening, like for us, like, we're going to go through hard times. Community and friendships, relationships are hard. We're called to endure things for the sake of the gospel and for the sake of relationship. Like, I think that's healthy. But people who have authority and power, especially, and a lot of times it's our white brothers and sisters, not all the time, but a lot of times, you have to be held in check as well. And you have to be realistic. And for my, brothers and sisters of color on here listening, you have to be able to experience the freedom, John Mark, you're talking about, knowing who has power or not, or is maybe even abusing power over you. So I think, yes, like, we're all individually responsible to stay how we feel called, but also please hear us saying there's a freedom to leave if it's becoming traumatic and toxic for you. Like, that's not the type of endurance we're called to in the Bible, or we're not called to, endure an abusive situation. Like, that's not just the Christian higher moral thing to do all the time.
Right. Yep. If it's abusive, leave. Yep.
Yeah.
It's space. Yeah. Yeah. I had a thought and now it's gone. Oh, there it goes.
And sorry, maybe this will jog your memory a little bit.
It might.
We mentioned this, so this is related. Reverse discrimination. Okay, we all know what discrimination is, but the term reverse discrimination is not an innovative term, but it's been closely associated with author and speaker activist Ibram X. Kendi and his book, How to Be Anti-Racist, which came out before a lot of this uprising of racial reckoning we've had. I know people think it came out right at the same time, but it didn't. Anyway, How to Be Anti-Racist, his whole thing is how to be anti-racist. He's wrote other books, but that's his thing. And that's obviously a lot of language that's been hijacked as well. But I want to say something about that because I think it is linked inextricably to cancel culture in a few ways. And so, I'll pull it up. The quote he says, or that's often referred to in his book, the only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. Okay. Then there's a pretty solid quote by Lyndon B. Johnson after that. But anyway, let's just stop there. So, thoughts on that quote, which naturally is going to get pushed back. He knows that. What are your knee-jerk reactions to him saying that the only remedy to discrimination is anti-racist discrimination? Only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination, and past discrimination is present discrimination.
That's interesting. I thought we were taking this. I thought we were taking this in a different direction, but this is a good direction. So his quote so it sounds like he's saying fight fire with fire.
Sure.
Right? It sounds like he's saying discriminate against those who are discriminatory, right?
Does any part of you agree with it?
I'm trying to find if there is a part of me that does agree with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So violence begets violence, punishment fit the crime. But then also, if an eye for an eye, we're all blind, right? so that I think that is a human response, right? If the person who was beaten all of a sudden gets the whip and has the power and authority to beat back, right? I feel like it's a natural human animal response to do that. But a higher response is to spare that person the pain that you've been through, even when they afflicted it on you, right?
Yeah.
And I say higher because I think that response innately believes in a more powerful something. So for the follower of Christ, it's God that is going to bring about vengeance, right? God is going to repay all of the injustices in the world. That's what the Bible preaches. But for someone who is more secular, I think would be the role of government to fix those wrongs. But we know that governments are often the oppressive one. Think of slaves in America, or Native Americans, or even some of the systems of poverty and prejudice that we still have today, right? So then that's why I appeal to God as the highest authority who will fix all those injustices too. But so I don't know. Yeah. If being anti-racist means you are against humans who are racist, I think that fight is in the wrong place. But if being anti-racist means that you're against the ideology and the thoughts and the systems of racism, then I'm like, yeah, okay, I think that's right. So it depends on what he means when he talks about discriminating against. Is he talking about discriminating against people or discriminating against ideas and policies and practices? Right. What do you think about that quote? Or what?
That's good. It's good. I think it's one of those both and things. So I would assume he knew that it would, the fruit of what he was saying would prompt discussions like this. So I think some of it might have been hyperbole. I don't think he means, I think it should be taken like this. And this, I'm going to be very opinionated. I think it's not like he said the only way to get over slavery is to enslave white people. Right? Like, I don't think he's doing that with a tit for tat type thing. Like, well, that's the only way. Like black people suffered. Now we're going to, enslave white people for 400 years and have them see how it feels. Like, I don't think it was that. I think the sentiment of the only actual way we're going to undo all this stuff is to start over almost. And the only way to kind of start over is to, you almost have to err on the opposite side sometimes. And I think that is, I think some of the truth in what he's saying is evident in news stories right now. One of which is like the pushback on something like affirmative action. Okay, so the whole thing with that is the pushback on an undoing of affirmative action in higher education and other places, but actual Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action in higher education, like race cannot be considered with the admissions process anymore. The pushback on that came from a very small group of people that didn't like that they weren't getting into Ivy Leagues and other institutions because white people and actually Asian people, because black people were being considered over them because of anything that had to do with race. So my point, I think that's exactly what this quote speaks about. Is it's not discrimination in the same sense of disenfranchisement or dehumanizing people. It's, well, how are we possibly going to get to a place of equality if we don't change how we've been doing the whole system and intentionally always before excluding and intentionally discriminating against people of color. You know what I'm saying? So like, I think what he's saying is truth in the sense of how is it, like, there's not another way. Like, and the other way that a lot of people pushing back on something like affirmative action, what they're saying is they want this race neutral approach to solve the past discrimination. And I think Ibram X. Kendi's point is it's impossible. It's not possible. And it's 100% impossible. It's not possible.
That ship has sailed.
In fact, that Lyndon B. Johnson quote said, "You don't take a person who for years has been hobbled by chains and liberate him, bring him up to the starting line of a race, and then say, you're free to compete with all the others and still justly believe that you have been completely fair." Like you have to err in a different side. And like, I think of a RBG quote when she was asked, when will you be satisfied with how many women are on the Supreme Court? And she said, and her response was, not till they're all women, meaning there wouldn't be pushback if that was about men.
Yep. That's a good quote.
But go ahead.
Rest in power. Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying. So he's not saying reverse discrimination as in oppress those who oppressed you, but he's saying reverse discrimination as in lift up those who have been oppressed. And it may feel unfair, but we can't be at a neutral place because of the history in our past, right? So
I'm not going to put words in his mouth. That's my assumption. Right. I think he's feeling.
That's okay. Yeah. No, I hear that. That I feel much better about than my reading of it. Maybe I should have been less cancel culture on him for that statement. Not that I would cancel him. I think he has a lot of good things to say. I think we have to use a lot of wisdom in when we read Kendi and take his information in. But I think he's well thought on these issues and speaks well to them. No, I hear you. I think I agree too. And I think affirmative action is a good example. And in the time, it was useful for bringing people of color and women into academic spaces and workspaces. Now, I think I'm hoping that our society is at a point that if a university or a business or a company has weird, racial demographic numbers or ethnic demographic numbers, and it's like, why don't you have a lot of Black people working in your company? Why are the numbers off? Then I think the public could be against that. I think we're at a point where maybe public thought and opinion would be in favor of having diversity. And so I think that society will drive itself, and we hopefully don't need affirmative action as much anymore. I'm not saying I'm glad that it's over. I don't think we're there, but I'm hopeful that we're at a point where it'll happen. And the other thing that I'm hopeful we're at a point is poverty has gone with ethnic minorities. They've been hand in hand in our nation's history, and still, the most impoverished are brown and Black people, and so they have a harder time getting into higher education or higher paying careers or higher jobs. And so I'm hopeful that companies, colleges, universities will look at different factors when considering diversity than just race now that has opened up for them. So, I don't know.
No, absolutely. I agree. Like in an ideal world, we wouldn't need affirmative action. I don't think that's all you're saying, but I think I 100% agree with that. I just don't think we're in an ideal world. I don't think we're anywhere near the ideal world. Not just kind of like, I really don't. Like, I think there's a lot of evidence that we're not there. And I think this sentiment that Ibram X. Kendi has brought up is kind of addressing that. Like, I think so a lot of organizations, or like whether it's churches, or I've been in a lot of those kind of conversations with church. Like, I think one of the inarguable steps towards fostering a multi-ethnic organization, including church, like you have to have a priority has got to be diverse leadership. And I don't think there's not an argument around that reality. Like that has to be one of the, if not the first step in how to go about things, no matter how long it takes. Like that's got to be something. And my point is, I think the only reason to argue about that is because you don't want to actually do it.
Yeah.
And so like it'd be ludicrous to, even with the gender argument, like if you're trying to have more women lead, like how could you not prioritize interviewing and vetting women for those positions? Like how ludicrous is it to be like, well, but that's a priority, but we're going to make sure we interview men and women equally. It's like that makes zero sense.
And for people who have seen a path to power, who have never had to face that, it feels like discrimination. Like
that's what I'm saying. It's a feeling. Like
it feels like discrimination.
That there's people being considered.
Everything has been weighted in your direction, right? You've been preferenced before, unstated preference, but you've been preferenced before because of your gender, your race, the culture you come from, the language you speak. You've been preferenced before, and now we're trying to bring diversity in, and it's like, oh, but there's so many people like. So I see what you're saying. That's where it comes in. So men will feel some kind of way when women are preferenced over them because they're women,
or even considered
because they thought that they had a clear path to whatever position they wanted. So it's like if of my kids, if I always gave my oldest like 2 candy bars and then the other one's 1 candy bar and 1 candy bar, then all of a sudden I started giving equal candy bars. She'd be like, well, why'd you take my candy bar away from me? And it's like, it's like, well, now there's fairness here. Before I was giving you unfair preference. So I think with the college administration, legacies for forever have been getting preference into these highest schools in our country, right? Legacy admissions is the opposite of affirmative action, and nepotism is the opposite of affirmative action in the workplace, right? Hiring your family or your friends' families or your business partner's family, right? It's like, are we going after that in the same way we're going after affirmative action? We still need, like, to your point, we still need that balance of affirmative action to counteract the negative of nepotism and legacy admissions. So
I think the reality is that the ideal world that we all claim to want is going to feel uncomfortable to people that have always benefited from it not being equal.
And that's well said.
And the unfortunate part is those people are the ones that are in power and can do something about it. Like getting rid of affirmative action just like that. Like resisting all these other changes, like stuff like the quote I read by former president saying that all this is getting rid of free speech and revising history, which is just all kinds of which way hypocritical for him to say. But it's true. Anyway, we got to go.
That man is the freest to say whatever he wants. He has nothing but free speech.
We gotta go, but some practicals. Look, with all this, we said a lot, and a lot of this stuff is interconnected as always. But even with what we began with, I can't help but notice. I think that you only know what you know, and you're going to be engaged with what you're engaged with. And I acknowledge the toxicity of something like keeping up with the news and or social media at times. But I also want to acknowledge the danger in cutting yourself off and just out of whether it's self-care at times, absolutely take a break. Like you need to do that for mental health a lot of times, but don't err on the side. Don't do the opposite end of the spectrum and just cut off and be uninformed about everything. And when stuff comes up that you're not informed about, that is important, take it in stride and inform yourself. And, we're not endorsing, I'll speak for, we're not endorsing cancel culture or reverse discrimination. We're endorsing uplifting the marginalized on here. And I just want to say, there are ways to continue to engage and be on social media or be off social media, but be engaged with the news in a healthy way. And to people that who are on both sides of stuff, you know, I encourage everyone to figure out how you can best engage, because, you know, I'm a big believer in even something like, I think we need to be informed about what's going on with politics to a degree, because politicians make policies which affect people. There's some good alliteration there. And to not engage with it is often a privilege. And everyone's got their own threshold. And when a lot of us decide to get engaged, sometimes it's just too late. And so I think can be a loving thing to be informed and engage with these things.
Yeah.
Not in an obsessive way, I'm not saying that, but in a way that is just, hey, this stuff affects people. I need to know what's going on as a human being. You got anything to add to that, John Mark? I think that's kind of the backdrop of why we even did this.
No, I think that's good. That's well said.
Awesome.
Responsibly engaged. Yeah.
Anyway, all right, we got to go. I know I've gone over time when we talked about John Mark, but look, man, thanks for potting with me. Listeners, as always, thank you for getting all the way to the end of this, spending just a little bit of time with us. Look, as always, please follow the podcast, submit to it, subscribe. That's the word. Subscribe to it.
Don't cancel.
Yeah, don't cancel us. Also, don't, submit to us necessarily. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, on all the platforms. It does, help us get listeners and all that kind of stuff. Write us a review if you have the time. Only give us 5 stars. If you don't want to give us 5 stars, don't give us 2 stars or anything.
Yeah. Like it or don't like it.
Yeah. We love y'all. Regardless, we're also on social media. Follow us there. We love to hear from you. We really do. Send us an email. We love engaging, and hopefully what you've been listening to is helpful. The music you're listening to is done by our guy Dylan Dent. The artwork and logo were created by Ashley Bush. And we'll see you guys next time.
The nightmare might scare you, no worse than reality. They hunt you by day, R.I.P. Ahmaud Arbery. Everybody got a time, but that's less than comforting. I hope I'm alive by the time they choose to comfort me. Mosquitoes in the vein, or leeches on my soul. This money on my mind is a fracture in my bones. You get crippled by continuing existence like a ghost. And they wonder why we drink, and they wonder why we smoke, and they wonder why we think that everything's a joke. I'm shocked that we can sleep, must be the thought of letting go.